In this world, people are divided into two categories based on their innate abilities. The first category is the warriors who fight with weapons like swords, bows, and spears. The second category is the mags who wield magic that controls elements like fire, earth, water, and wind. However, rarely a mage has the ability to control the element of light. At the age of 10, all children with mage ability undergo a nationwide attribute test where priests use a glowing orb to reveal a child's destiny. Unfortunately, for a young wide-eyed orphan named Light, he gets bestowed with light magic, which is the weakest attribute as it doesn't have any offensive power. He is incredibly sad because his childhood crush Seiya got fire magic. After his attribute test, everyone at the orphanage, even Seiya, grows distant from Light, and he grows up all alone, working as a low-level potter for small hunting parties. However, 5 years later, his luck changes when one afternoon, Light gets an invitation from one of the most elite hunting parties in the world, Silver Will. He initially refuses to accept the invitation, but he is convinced by his childhood crush, Seiya, and his idol, Grand Maid Agunal, who are part of Silver Will. Soon afterwards, the party enters a dark and ominous dungeon, which happens to be the resting grounds of the Lich King. Agunal says that their objective is to retrieve an S-tier artifact, which is capable of absorbing the surrounding magic power and returning it to the user. That whole day, the party explore the dungeon and occasionally come across some skeletal zombies, which they easily defeat. That night, after most members of the group have slept, Agunal and Light have a conversation. Light's eyes fall on the large object Agunal has been carrying all day, and he asks the Grand Mage if it's heavy. Agunal explains that it is a portable magic tank, which might look cumbersome, but in reality is not that heavy. Agunal adds that the magic tank is absolutely necessary for someone like him due to his low magic capacity. He further explains that although mags can use magic transfer, which allows sharing one's magic with another, the conversion efficiency is poor and about half the energy is lost in the process. The portable magic tank keeps supplying Agunal with magic mana so that he can fully use his abilities. A priest named Father Cuts, who is also a part of Silver Will, remarks that someone like Light, who has a huge reserve of magic power, wouldn't even need a tank like that. On the other hand, Agunal confesses to Light that he still wants to reach greater heights. This surprises Light as Agunal is already a sage with the title of Great Sage. He shows his simpleton thinking and asks what more Agunal could possibly want. Agunal declares that his goal is to become a mythical S-rank mage, and for him to do so, he absolutely must obtain the S-tier artifact, the Lich King Staff. He insists that achieving this is essential for him, and he is willing to do whatever it takes. As the group pushes deeper into the dungeon, the enemies grow stronger, but the team continues forward without hesitation. Eventually, they reach a dark and eerie space, which turns out to be the Lich King's resting place. Agunal points out to a staff lying ahead and says that it is the Necromancer King's staff. On the other hand, Light makes a surprising observation that no more monsters appear along the way, but the chamber is filled with countless coffins. Suddenly, Agunal calls out to Light saying that it is now his turn to help in the mission. Light, who has never done anything of importance in his life, is confused and surprised by this. Agunal then calmly asks him to retrieve the staff, but Light continues to stare in shock and protests that there's no way he can do that. Trying to reassure him, Agunal promises that the rest of them will protect him with all their strength. Light finally nods and agrees after a brief moment of hesitation. He then steps forward unaware that from this point onward, everything will begin to change and he will come to know the truth. Just as Light picks up the staff, a terrifying figure emerges from the shadows which turns out to be none other than the Lich King. The massive figure is cloaked in darkness and his skeletal form tries to clutch the staff which is now glowing with power. In a panic, Agunal shouts that they can't defeat the Lich King in their current state. He urges Light to throw the staff to him, claiming that with it, he'll be able to bring the Lich King down. Light, who's more naive than someone reading the terms and conditions of a new software, tosses the staff as directed. But the moment the staff leaves his hands and reaches Agunal, a sinister laugh echoes through the chamber. The mage lets out a menacing and mocking laugh, saying he hadn't expected Light to be so easily deceived. It now becomes clear that it was all a trap from the very beginning. The priest steps forward, coldly confirming that Light has served his purpose. He refers to him as the boy with the wrong attribute or the so-called useless light magic. Light, who is now beginning to realize the treachery, is stunned due to the shock. He had suspected this all along, but had chosen to ignore the signs. He admits that he wanted to believe that powerful beings had treated him well, needed him, accepted him, and he was given a chance to adventure with the person he admired. But just like boys dreaming of becoming professional sports stars, this had all been a dream that he was simply fabricating in his head. He reflects on how badly he wanted to prove that the people who once looked down on him were wrong. Memories flash in his mind. A younger Seiya once promised that they would go on adventures together. Her dream had always been to stand beside him, but that memory shatters when Seiya now coldly says that luring Light into this trap was a piece of cake. Several undead zombie-like skeletons swarm him from all sides as he tries to hold them off with his holy light magic. Nearby, Aguno, who is carrying a crescent-tipped staff, continues to laugh maniacally like he's watching stand-up comedy instead of someone fighting for their life. Light's childhood crush Seiya is wrapped around Aguno's arms watching him struggle with excitement. Seiya explains that his magical power is abnormally high, making him perfect to lure the magic-hungry undead zombies. The priest notes that Light served the group leader, Aguno, well. Meanwhile, Aguno admires the staff Light retrieved, stating that since they are in the resting place of the legendary Lich King, it is only fitting for Light to become a meal for the undead. He then bids farewell to Light and sarcastically refers to him as the one cursed with the wrong type of power, aka the light magic. While everyone is busy gloating, Light continues to fight desperately with his holy light power. He even pushes back the horde of zombies as he thinks to himself how close he is to collapse. A stunned Light cries out Seiya's name like he is some hero in a rom-com movie. Facing the overwhelming power of the Lich King, he questions whether this is truly where he will die while being discarded like a tool. But then he continues to cast his holy light attack despite being surrounded by innumerable enemies. He had earlier managed to raise his light magic to level 6, but he can only cast intermediate spells that only temporarily repel enemies. He thinks bitterly about how everyone sees him as useless and the one with the wrong attributes. No matter how much he levels up, his light magic lacks the offensive power necessary to survive. A wounded Light tells himself that he cannot lose and that he must live. He casts Holy Light again and again, pouring every ounce of strength into the spell. He knows that if he stops, he'll be devoured by the undead horde in seconds. As the magic burns brightly and forces back the shadows, Light pushes toward the exit of the Lich King's sleeping chamber. He tells himself he must make it, and all he has to do is climb the hill near the exit and escape. His body is racked with pain and blood trickles from his wounds. He cries out he is experiencing magic deficiency, which might be causing harm to his internal organs. Realizing his magic is completely depleted, he stumbles, but his will remains unbroken. He drags himself forward, determined to prove that he's not finished yet. Just as he collapses, he spots something nearby, the magic tank Aguno had been carrying earlier. Light realizes that Aguno, being arrogant like he is some hotshot, must have discarded it after acquiring the Lich King staff. Chased by undead, Light pleads to the heavens, hoping the tank still contains some magic. He fumbles and tries to find the activation switch while still begging for even a little power. Seconds later, he manages to activate the tank and a surge of magic floods into his body. Light is stunned by this newfound energy and shouts that this power and sensation are incredible. But then he hesitates as he feels strange, but cannot pinpoint what it is. The feeling is unlike anything he's experienced before. Sitting quietly in one corner of the dungeon, he reflects on what just happened and wonders if what he feels now is similar to a magic transfer or perhaps something more. Still processing the overwhelming sensation surging through his body, Light quietly reflects that this power feels entirely different from before. However, as the undead monsters begin to rise, channeling dark energy around them, Light casts Holy Light once more. Radiant energy explodes from his hands and it holds back the advancing horde. Clutching the magic tank tightly, he curses under his breath and resolves that he must survive and escape. The Lich King is still out there in the dungeon, and its skeletal form radiates an oppressive, menacing aura like his some certified menace. As the magic within the chamber grows, Light winces in pain, and he gets overwhelmed by the sudden surge in energy. Then the Lich King speaks with a sinister tone and begins to taunt Light. It declares that if Light wants to leave the dungeon alive, he must defeat the boss. Light's eyes widen as he realizes that this must be the dungeon's final trial. If he can clear it, there must be a way out of this god-forsaken place. Determined, Light considers his next move as he knows that he must immobilize the Lich King even if it is for a short time. If he can just make it to the exit while buying himself some distance, he might have a chance. As the Lich King begins to cast a powerful spell, a glowing magic circle forms above its head emitting a terrifying aura. Light clutches the magic tank as he feels the energy inside him intensifying. He suddenly realizes that the tank is restoring his magic at full capacity. So with his strength renewed, Light confidently declares that he can make this work. Once again, like Harry Potter, he casts the only spell he knows, which is the Holy Light. Because it's a low-level spell, Light notes that he can cast it continuously, but the Lich King is unaffected and gathers dark energy to strike. Light is forced to hatch another plan, hold the enemy off while advancing toward the exit. If he can maintain pressure, maybe he will be able to escape. The Lich King's skeletal hand glows with dark energy, reaching out as if to crush him. But Light, despite being surrounded by that malicious aura, channels his power and prepares a counter-attack. A massive burst of energy erupts as the two forces collide. The blow hits Light hard, yet he grits his teeth and refuses to back down. Then in a flash, Light leaps into the air and announces a technique named Light Magic Mirage. He shouts that the true target is here and declares that the bottom-tier adventurer will break through this dungeon using a bold direct assault strategy. With the stupid plan of a one-man ambush, he lunges forward towards his enemy. Shouting a battle cry, Light unleashes another powerful holy light spell whose energy slams into the Lich King. The clash of dark and light magic illuminates the entire chamber. Although light magic typically has zero attack power, its incredible speed is what gives Light the edge. He continues to cast spell after spell, holy light over and over again, striking the Lich King repeatedly. He hopes the rapid barrage will slow down the enemy's movement. To his surprise, the Lich King finally cries out in pain as its dark energy weakens under the relentless assault. Meanwhile, Light pants as he is nearly at his limit, but suddenly a notification appears before him that says that his light attribute magic level has reached level 10. A second notification quickly follows and it reads that a new skill named Meteor Shower has been acquired. He realizes with all that this is the final level 10 magic of the light attribute. As his body begins to glow with immense power, Light steadies himself for the next phase of the battle. He now stands at the dungeon center surrounded by several dark scary monsters. The Lich King's skeletal hand reaches for him again and its dark magic flares like never before, but Light doesn't back down. Faced with the overwhelming power of the Lich King, Light tells himself that there's no way he can win. As the situation continues to escalate, the Lich King's skeletal hand reaches out, its dark energy glowing powerfully. Light braces himself and calls out Lich's name as the blow slams into him and sends him crashing to the ground. Struggling to get back up, Light watches in shock as the Lich King recovers without hesitation. Its dark aura intensifies as it lets out a roar, and the monster begins to command its undead minions to attack. Its skeletal body glows with dark, twisted power as it unleashes a fearsome wave of energy. Overwhelmed, Light groans that this is bad as he realizes that like every single mother, he can't dodge this shot in time. The towering Lich King stands over him as if to show the Light who is the boss. Even in pain, Light forces himself to his feet as he is still determined not to give up. He declares that he won't fall so easily no matter what. Channeling his remaining energy, Light begins to glow with radiant light. He announces that now, finally, he can unleash the ultimate light magic. With all his might, he shouts and casts Meteor Shower, which is the highest tier spell of the light attribute. Beams of light rain down like falling stars engulfing the Lich King and its army in a devastating glow. The entire battlefield begins to shake as his blasts tear through the dark zombie-like creatures. The Lich King's form begins to disintegrate under the powerful onslaught. Light, who is now breathing like a fat boy who ran 2 flights of stairs, notes that the spell's magic consumption is tremendous as nearly all his mana vanishes in a single cast. The dungeon is now silent, and Light realizes that after the gruesome battle, the Lich King is finally gone. He exclaims that he has finally defeated a powerful enemy using his so-called useless light magic. But the celebration is short-lived as a monstrous roar echoes through the chamber. To his horror, Light sees the Lich King still standing and its skeletal form seemingly unharmed. Its dark aura intensifies once again as powerful enemy prepares to attack one more. Right at this moment, a status window opens in front of Light, showing the details of the Meteor Shower spell. He examines it closely and realizes the horrible truth. While the spell lit up the battlefield and covered a wide area, its attack power is still 0 like all of his previous attacks. The undead Lich King begins to laugh with a twisted mocking voice. It taunts Light's efforts and says that Light's attacks were like a boy scratching his back. The monster declares that light magic is utterly useless against it. An extremely frustrated Light screams repeatedly in desperation as his hands shake like a ghost possessed him. Blood drips from his finger, which is a sign of internal damage caused by severe magic deficiency. His body is breaking down, and he wonders if his organs are ruptured. However, after seeing the magic tank nearby, Light refuses to give up. He cries out that he can still fight and begs the tank for more power. Just as he reaches toward it, something unexpected happens. A human hand suddenly emerges from underneath the tank. Light cannot believe what he is seeing and he freezes for a few seconds. As Light stares at the human hand emerging from the rubble, he gasps in shock. A figure begins to rise and he sees that it is a girl hidden within the remains of the magic tank. This triggers several memories as he recalls Anujal once calling the portable magic tank heavy and cumbersome. Light now realizes that Anujal is a fraud and that his groundbreaking design for the tank was also a scam. He grows extremely angry and swears to save the girl at all costs. Still stunned, Light begins removing the cover of the damaged magic tank. He gets even more surprised when he sees a girl lying inside. He exclaims that she's alive and internally, he is relieved to find another survivor in the dungeon. He quickly realizes that her attribute is also light and she was the person who was being used for magic transfer by Agenil and unknowingly by himself. Light grows even more serious and sad as he reflects on what this means. To make her portable enough to fit in the tank, Anujal probably deprived her of food and kept her locked inside the tank and forcing her to continuously supply magic. He becomes incredibly sad as he admits to himself that he hadn't known the truth. Even now, just by touching her, Light can feel her magic flowing into him. He remembers how it was the same in the past when he had carried the tank around without realizing a person was inside. He apologizes to her for unknowingly hurting her and then hugs her tightly. Despite everything, she is still giving him her magic. Suddenly, the Lich King lets out a low growl and its dark energy flows through the air as it prepares to attack again. Light quickly casts Holy Light and the spell drives the Lich King back for a while. Light recalls all the times he was mocked and called a walking torch with useless magic. But even then, he never felt like he was treated like this before. Remembering Agonal's cold laughter, Light recalls how he was only used to obtain the Lich King's staff. This means that Agenil had also discarded the girl like she was trash. Fueled by pure rage, Light declares that he will never forgive Agenil. He holds the girl close and promises to get her out of there alive. He urges her to lend him her strength and vows to make things right and defeat Agonil with his own hands. Now burning with determination and hatred, Light begins channeling his power. He is standing in the darkness of the dungeon completely surrounded by the Lich King's looming energy. So he unleashes Holy Light at maximum output, which activates his continuous casting ability. Radiant energy floods the space, overwhelming the darkness with a light like he has never seen before. Light shouts that even with zero attack power, his magic is still a purifying force that must not be underestimated. Warning the Lich King to move aside, he screams and forces the spell beyond its limits. Right at this moment, a notification appears and says that light magic has reached its maximum value. Unbothered by this, Light casts Holy Light again, but another notification flashes saying his light magic has maxed out. Again and again, he casts the spell, refusing to stop. He shouts to the girl demanding that they get out of there together. More notifications appear, each one repeating the same warning that light magic has reached the maximum value. Still overwhelmed, Light grows frustrated and yells at the stupid system to shut the EFF up. He demands attack power and insults the magic notifications as worthless. Yet he continues again and again, casting Holy Light and refusing to give up. As the Lich King's dark energy reaches its peak, its skeletal hand begins glowing ominously. It lunges toward Light and the girl, but Light immediately steps in front of her. The Lich King's dark hand comes crashing down and lands directly on Light. While bravely shielding the girl from the Lich King's deadly attack, Light begins to collapse. His body gives up under the strain as he tries to hold his ground while the girl is still unconscious on the floor. Despite the pain going through him, he grits his teeth and clutches at the last traces of magic in his hand. He refuses to give up. And with utmost determination, he summons his Holy Light and casts yet another spell in a desperate bid to survive and save the girl. Suddenly, a system notification appears and says that the light magic level has run into an error. Another notification follows and says that the current status has run into an error. Light realizes that something is wrong as his magic is faltering abnormally. He gasps as he realizes the severity of the situation. His body is suffering from extreme magic power depletion, which is the cost of pushing beyond his limit. In the background, the Lich King roars again as its dark energy glows ominously. Suddenly, another notification appears and it says that light magic has leveled up. Then another notification says that it has reached the upper limit for light attribute. This is followed by another notification that says an achievement has been unlocked and now light attribute can be evolved. Light stares in disbelief as the system prompts if he would like to evolve the light attribute. He's confused as he has never heard of any kind of attribute evolution. The system asks again if he wants to proceed. Light hesitates as he is still stunned, but then clenches his fist and declares that he will accept the offer. With that, he selects the yes option from the system prompt. Following this, a brilliant, blinding burst of energy erupts from his body like he hits some post-nut clarity. His entire form is engulfed in pure white light as the evolution begins. Light cries out in pain and/or as he can barely handle the flood of power. After a few seconds, a notification appears and says that the attribute evolution is now complete. His powers have evolved from light attribute to ray attribute. Light, who is still glowing, murmurs that while his basic power is still light, something feels different now. He then sees the newly updated status screen where a new magic spell, level 1 laser, has appeared. As Light examines the ability, he feels intense heat and power gathering at his fingertips, specifically his index and middle fingers. The energy crackles violently, and he instinctively understands what to do. Meanwhile, the Lift King, who is still walking around like nothing has happened, swirls with menacing dark energy, preparing for another strike. Light narrows his eyes, focuses all the gathered power, and with the burst of instinct, he channels it into a focused beam. Seconds later, a searing laser beam shoots from Light's fingers and travels through the darkness with astonishing speed and intensity. The beam slams into the Lich King's core and engulfs it in an explosion of light. At the same time, a notification confirms and says that laser activation has been fired. The beam continues to intensify, battering the Lich King's form. Light braces himself as the recoil from the collision rocks his body. The Lich King, on the other hand, screams in fury as the beam tears through its skeletal form. The monster begins to crack like wrapping paper as its body splinters and finally disintegrates under the overwhelming power of Light's newly evolved ray attribute. The entire dungeon is engulfed in a blinding flash. And soon, the Lich King's dark energy vanishes into nothingness. Light, who is panting and stunned, remains standing in the aftermath while his body still glows faintly with residual energy. Around him, the undead minions caught in the blast are obliterated into pulp. The once towering and invincible Lich King has collapsed into dust and its form has shattered. Light stares at the devastation caused by his laser and mutters in disbelief about the overwhelming power. The dungeon is filled with a lingering glow as the last traces of the Lich King's dark energy begin to vanish. Light notes that his attack melted the rock wall behind the Lich King as if it were glass. Exhausted, he opens his status screen to process what just happened. The screen shows his evolved attribute named Ray Attribute LV1. It describes the skill laser as one that pierces everything with the power of science and notes that its output depends on the magic power used. Light sees the attack power listed as 100,000 to infinity, and he reacts with stunned disbelief, realizing the scale of his new strength. Suddenly, the remnants of the Lich King let out a final growl, and the surrounding undead rumored to be a horde of 1,000 began to charge. Light, who is still glowing with the Ray Attribute's power, declares inwardly that this is the attack power he had long wished for. He prepares to fire again, calling the undead nothing more than small fry. A concentrated beam fires from his fingers, piercing the horde with ease. The undead disintegrate instantly in a flash of light, and even phantom enemies are destroyed in a single strike. Light notices that even the bleeding from his wounds has stopped. Thanks to the attribute evolution. He feels his strength returning and confirms to himself that his magic power is back even if his body is battered. He looks at the girl lying on the ground and quietly thanks her for saving him. With a smile, he says they'll escape together. Summoning the power of his ray magic, Light fires another laser and cuts through dungeon obstacles. A notification appears confirming that he has leveled up multiple times as an adventurer. Following this, Light declares that his new power will let him cut through anything. He promises to survive and get out of the dungeon. He adds that he'll show the sky to the girl who had been trapped in the dark tank, treated as nothing more than a tool. Recalling Agonal's previous mocking words, Light smirks and unleashes another powerful laser. The beam blasts through the dungeon's final barrier, and a tremor shakes the walls, and a new landscape emerges beyond, a bright world with mountains. Light gazes at the light pouring through the hole he created. Overwhelmed and exhausted, he collapses onto the ground. A close-up of a yellow eye watches the scene silently. The girl kneels beside Light and watches him with a concerned expression on her face. Just before Light fires his laser toward the sky, Agenil and his party return with the Lich King's staff. Agenil curses in frustration, feeling as though he'll collapse from sheer exhaustion. He grits his teeth, thinking that the darkness drains energy too quickly and that it's dangerous to let one's guard down even for a moment. As he looks at Light, he realizes with disbelief that Light was actually useful and more than just bait. Light mutters quietly that he feels like he's just being used again. Nearby, undead begin to swarm again, and as their dark energy pulses, the creatures charge at the group. A priest in the party casts a spell and lightning soon crackles around them. Agunal curses and unleashes a lightning arrow to drive the enemies back, shouting for everyone to run. On the other hand, the useless Saya groans in frustration, saying that Light's presence is triggering awakenings all over the dungeon, making things worse. She yells that she can't take this anymore, but Agonal pleads with the others to hold on, knowing they are close to escaping. The group stumbles together, and Agonal asks Saya to light the way since they can't see the path. However, the latter refuses and explains that she is already at the limit of her magical abilities. Agonal internally sneers and asks if she's even capable of using light magic. He insults her and reflects inwardly that he only let her join the party for her attack power. He mocks her for lacking brains and calls her garbage. He then mutters that he wants to ditch her, but admits that her magic is still providing light. Saya glares at him, but doesn't respond. She then mutters Agonal's name bitterly and reaches out for help. Agonal finally responds and pleads with her to hang in there. He admits he can use light magic, but his power is limited and must be conserved for emergencies. Saya asks why he doesn't just use the Lich King staff. Agonal explains that the staff is an unknown item that can't be used until it's examined properly. Frustrated, Saya shouts and casts a small flame, calling for the light to guide them. The group gathers around the flickering fire, and Agonal internally grumbles that the light is pathetic and will only last a few more minutes. He asks if they threw away light too soon and begins to consider alternatives. Suddenly, a cracking sound echoes that startles Agonal. A faint glow appears on the ground, and the floor beneath them turns red and warm. The priest shouts that something's wrong, but cannot pinpoint what, as he is confused by the sudden change. Agonal mutters that he doesn't understand what's happening. But before he can finish his sentence, a fiery explosion erupts from below, and Agonal yells for everyone to run. From the other side, Light fires a laser in an attempt to counter the blast. Saya gasps in shock. She screams that there's fire everywhere, overwhelmed by the heat. Agenal shouts for someone to extinguish the flames. Saya groans in disgust, saying that the smell from the burning potion stinks. Beginning agrees that the stench is awful, but says it's still better than dying. The party's clothes begin to burn from the heat. Saya cries out that it smells terrible. The priest nervously asks if this explosion might be connected to the Lich King's lair. He points at the sky above them, where the ceiling has cracked, revealing light pouring in. Agenal questions if this is the Lich King's magic. Saya urges the group to move while the priest suggests they offer something to Light. Saya grumbles that Light was annoying even as a child. She then wonders aloud where Light's attribute magic is now, calling it the worst of all. Beginning winces at her words and warns that if this really is the Lich King's magic, they are in serious trouble. Agunal agrees, saying that if it devours Light, they'll be next. The priest urges Saya to act. Agunal yells that they need Light's power now. Saya declares she's on it and begins preparing a spell. Agunal urges everyone to move quickly. They need to escape fast. A small flame lights up the dungeon again, casting a faint glow on the walls. Meanwhile, Light's hand trembles as he tries to get up, exhausted and struggling to stay conscious. A small light glows in the dungeon, casting a faint illumination across the blood-stained walls. Light slowly opens his eyes, confused by his surroundings. He sighs and mutters in disbelief, wondering if he's really still alive. He touches his side and winces, noting aloud that he took a fatal wound to his stomach. As he reflects, he recalls how in desperation, he had shouted for Aguinal to wait for him before everything went dark. Still groggy, Light wipes his eyes and casts a weak light spell to see better. The soft glow in the dungeon is enough to see the battered state of his body. He gasps slightly, noting that the wound still hurts and that his clothes are torn. He says to himself that there's no way that Snake Agonil and the others came back. He then scans the room in confusion and asks who could have treated his wounds. That's when he notices the girl from the mana device, Yami, who has been watching him quietly. Her pale skin and white hair are unmistakable, and Light immediately recognizes her as the girl who was trapped in the mana tank. Yami silently points toward the light above, drawing his gaze. Light tells her that he can use magic again and asks curiously if she's the one who patched him up. She remains silent and doesn't even utter a single word. Light takes the silence as confirmation and replies that he understands. He expresses his gratitude and explains that there's a lingering smell of medicinal herbs on the cloth used to treat him. He also comments that the tightness of the bandages suggests careful wrapping. Thinking aloud, Light reflects that his adventure level must have risen, which could explain why he healed so quickly. He explains to himself that an adventurer's level affects physical strength and recovery, while magic levels are determined by magical proficiency. He recalls that adventure levels usually don't increase much unless enemies are defeated. Support roles, like healers, only get minimal experience. Light opens his status screen and examines it. He says that he was level 15 before, but is now level 30. His eyes widen as he realizes that he must have defeated the Lich King. He mutters that defeating enemies is natural for adventurers, but until now, he hadn't been able to do it. Looking over the damage in the area, he sees the marks left on the rock wall. Light clenches his fist and says that things are different now. Suddenly, Yami sneezes, disturbed by the dusty air. Light quickly asks if she's okay and tells her to wait. Looking at her more closely, he notices that her body is still covered in blood. He gently drapes his cloak over her and tells her to warm up a bit. Yami looks at him with surprise, but Light says her name softly, then introduces himself before asking for her name. Yami stands in silence for a moment. Then in a soft clear voice, she says her name is Yami. Light repeats it aloud, surprised she even responded and didn't stay quite like a low IQ person. He says her name again and observes her distant yet gentle expression. He notes that she's not much of a talker, which makes sense given she's likely been crammed in that mana tank for who knows how long. A memory flashes through his mind and he sees Agonal laughing, boasting that he is the one with the light attribute. Light clenches his fist slightly, telling himself to stay calm. Turning to Yami, he gently suggests that they head back to town. She looks at him, her expression unsure but curious. Smiling at her, Light tells her he wants to show her the world outside. As Yami continues to watch him quietly, Light thinks to himself that he can't leave her behind, at least not like this. If they are going to survive together, they'll need money, a place to go, and a plan. But for now, he turns to her and asks gently if she could wait just a little longer. Still feeling unsettled, Light knows there's something left to do. Smiling confidently, he declares that it's time to gather the loot. Standing beside Yami, he adds that the loot is for her and for his future. He picks up a glowing orb and Yami watches with curiosity. Tilting her head, she shows her confusion about the item. Light explains that it's the core of an undead. He tells her that cores like these drop when enemies are defeated and can be traded for useful items. He adds that undead loot isn't very valuable, but it's better than nothing. Light continues saying that he can sell these for money once they're back. He reflects that there's no way Gonil is going to pay him the quest reward anyway. His equipment is in tatters, a clear sign of the battle's toll. Yami sits nearby listening closely. Light turns to her and asks if she's okay helping him. He thanks her sincerely. Yami gives a slight nod in response. Light calls her name again to make sure she's with him. Suddenly, Yami collapses and Light rushes forward to catch her. He notices the magical box nearby and realizes she's been through a lot. Even so, she had the strength to undress him and treat his wounds. He tells her to rest now, reassuring her that there are no more monsters. He promises to gather the loot on his own. Her expression softens as she lies down. Wrapping herself in Light's cloak, Yami closes her eyes. A calm settles over her. Light scans the dungeon, still wondering where Agunil and the others went. He questions whether they simply ran off. Then he murmurs that Yami must have used potions and herbs to treat him and notes they'll be useful later. Spotting a pile of items nearby, Light notices a few scraps of cloth. Looking more closely, he identifies them as spare clothes left behind by Seiya. He thinks he might be able to find something for Yami to wear. He examines the fabric, but sighs when he sees it's little more than strings. Light glances over at Yami, observing that she's only wearing undergarments. He tells himself that she must be cold. Panicking a little, he mutters that if he walks around with a girl dressed like that, he might get arrested. He explains to himself that he doesn't have any weird hobbies and is just someone whose magic recently evolved. His thoughts drift back to the orphanage. He remembers the priest, the rumors, the whispers about disgusting acts. He recalls people saying the priest preyed over orphan girls and treated them terribly. He questions whether Seiya was also one of those unfortunate girls. Light thinks further. If Seiya was the priest's lover and now she's with Agenal, it would mean they've been connected since the beginning. He clenches his fist, wondering if the rest of the rumors were true. He remembers hearing that the orphans were sold off to human traffickers. He thinks about how Agenal treated Yami and realizes that she too may have been considered a mere commodity. Commodity? Looking at her, Light thinks that Yami is a living tool, something that the priest left behind. His expression hardens with determination. He tells himself that for now, recovering the Lich King's loot is the priority. He resumes collecting the undead cores, preparing for whatever comes next. Holding another core, Light notes that even the ashes of the Lich King hold value and he'll recover everything he can. While sorting through the remains, Light finds a piece of old cloth and looks surprised. He picks up, wondering what it could be. Then he realizes that it is the Lich King's robe turned to ash, but this might be a burial shroud. Shortly afterwards, he calls out to Yami and walks over holding the shroud. Light gently apologizes for making her wait and says that it's almost time to go. He hands her the dark robe, telling her to put it on. Yami examines it and notices that Light crafted it from the remains of the Lich King's robe. She puts it on with care, showing her appreciation. Light smiles and says it suits her perfectly. Yami looks at him, her eyes bright. Light asks if she likes it. Yami begins to stand then starts to run. Light quickly calls out to her, offering his hand to help her up. Her expression reveals a mix of trust and hesitation. Yami looks at his hand, remembering shadows and dangerous figures looming around her. Light gently pats her head and softly says they should leave together. And to his surprise, Yami happily agrees to do so. Noticing Yami's haggard state, Light sees that she is dozing off while she is still standing. Instead of letting her sleep, he wakes her up and gently tells her that the exit is still far away and encourages her to hop on his back. Yami looks at him, her expression a mix of concern and trust. Light reassures her not to worry, though he admits it might be tough. He reflects that thanks to his rising adventure level, he's getting stronger. Light mentions that he's used to carrying things back when he was an errand boy, though now he may have gotten a little greedy. Looking at Yami with quiet resolve, Light lifts her onto his back. He notes that she's incredibly light, not just in weight, but in feeling. He compares it to how heavy his usual burdens felt at the orphanage. As he walks, Light thinks about how Agunal and the others always emphasized keeping the cargo small and lightweight. Yami clings to him and asks if he's all right. Light replies that is fine, assuring her he now has the strength of level 30 and the spirit to match his magical level. Following this, Yami gazes forward with curiosity and Light notes that the air once reeking of death now smells of greenery. They approach the dungeon's exit with Light glowing at the top of the stairs. With each step, Light's pace stays steady as they draw closer to the outside world. Once they emerge from the dungeon, Light looks up at the bright sky and feels a wave of relief wash over him. He gives an Oscar-worthy speech and declares that they have finally made it to their freedom. Yami looks up at him with wide eyes and mimics his laughter. Following this, Light gently sets Yami down and tells her to try standing on her own. He asks how it feels and checks if it's all right. Yami, who is stepping out for the first time, answers that the ground feels soft. Light smiles and asks if she can see the world now, urging her to take it all in. Yami looks around and sees the dark mana tank lying on the ground nearby and remembers where she came from. Suddenly, Light throws his arms up and shouts that he's back. His voice full of excitement and relief, but memories come flooding back as he remembers the betrayals, the monsters, the near-death moments they faced recently. He recalls Yami's past and her time in the tank and all her suffering. Images of Agunal and the priest with cold blue eyes flash through his mind. Light clenches his fists and angrily shouts into the open forest that they have managed to survive despite being betrayed. Meanwhile, the Silverwool party approaches the village in a wagon drawn by 2 horses. The bald Cuts, who is driving it quickly, draws attention from the locals because of his shiny dome. Inside the wagon, Saya notices people staring and complains loudly that everyone is looking at her, wondering why she has to appear like this. Saya cries that she'll never be able to get married now. Agonil snaps at her to shut up, calling her a brat in his thoughts. He reflects that most of their supplies were burned to ash, and only a little loot remains in the wagon. He calls out to the Cuts and tells him to stop, stating that it's time to take care of something. The team realizes that there's still some loot left in the wagon, but it is not enough. Saya looks at Cut's shiny bald head while he mutters something to himself like he just escaped a mental facility. It's clear they plan to rob someone wealthy so that they can take their money and clothes. Cuts protests saying they can't do that and points out that while the area is rough and security is low, there are still several guards patrolling around. Agenil then turns to Saya and asks if she needs to wash up, pointing out that she looks like someone beat her up. Saya admits she smells like a week-old trash can, which makes Agonil smirk. He says they are the Silverwool party, and his tone suggests that their reputation alone should get people to help them freely. But Cut shakes his head and tells him that won't work. Dressed as they are, no one's going to believe them. Agunal tells them they'll manage somehow while Saya looks at him with a confused expression. Cuts, on the other hand, still protests, saying Agonil absolutely shouldn't tarnish their party's name. Agonil adds that it looks like they'll have to return to the field after all since they've got emergency supplies stored there. Cuts questions what Ajnil is even thinking, knowing that if he got caught doing something reckless, it would destroy their business ties. Upon hearing this, Ajnil curses the priest under his breath and thinks about all the borderline crimes that the latter has committed. Ajnil mutters that if his magical powers had returned, he would be out hunting monsters right now so that he could sell a few drops and get by. His voice is full of frustration as he reflects on Yami's fate. She was small and light, and her magic power was extraordinary. Ajnil recalls how breaking her will wasn't easy. He also notes that the Lich King's staff absorbed a strong hit but didn't get a scratch. He wonders aloud if the staff is made of some special material and starts thinking about its potential curses. Eventually, after thinking about 1,000 things like an ADHD boy, Ajnil decides he needs to return to the capital to investigate. He knows it will be difficult, but it's necessary. Ajnil states that he'll have to remake the magic tank from scratch. He explains that the magic tank has too many limitations as it needs a person inside held at the edge of life and death, and he has to carry it himself. On top of that, the person inside must be small, light, and have a high amount of magical power, ideally, a skinny girl. Recalling his early experiments, Ajnil mentions that during the research phase, they even tried amputating limbs, but he coldly concludes that they didn't last long. Turning to the wagon, Ajnil tells Cuts that once they return, the latter needs to get him a child as usual. He adds that he doesn't care how much it costs knowing how rare such a person is. Ajnil explains that he needs a girl with the highest magic power, which means either the shadow or the light attribute. Cuts nods saying both attributes are rare, especially shadow, which occurs in only 1 in every 10,000 people. He suggests they check large orphanages or reach out to the slave traders they are connected to. Cuts calmly replies that he understood, but Ajnil says he doesn't expect to find either type at a low price. He tells Cuts to deliver the girl as soon as one is found and adds that unless she's especially beautiful, shadow or light types don't even sell well as slaves. Ajnil knows that shadow attribute children are often discarded by families and orphanages. He remembers Light, a boy with the light attribute who stayed in the orphanage for years without being thrown out. Laughing darkly, Ajnil says that by buying and using such trash, they are doing those low-life people a favor. He mocks the world's absurdity and claims that what he is doing is actually a social service. He thinks about Yami again and remembers how at first she had trusted him. He remembers watching the trust fade from her eyes little by little as she sat trapped in confinement. Like a true sociopath, Ajnil thinks that her crumbling hope was the best part. Her expression when she was finally shoved into the tank was pure perfection. Ajnil begins to laugh maniacally as he remembers Yami's terror and says he could relive that moment forever. Saya watches him with unease as he laughs with twisted evil expressions. Ajnil says there's nothing like trampling on someone's dignity and even declares that he deserves this enjoyment. He continues to yap and says that he has overcome humiliation and risen above it. Thus, he has the right to take vengeance and do whatever he pleases. Ajnil yells that the world is unjust and that he will take what he wants. Back in the forest, Light notices something ahead. He points it out and calls for Yami to come over before saying he has one request for her. Light states again that he has one request for Yami. He points toward a nearby spring and asks if she sees it, suggesting that they go wash up. Yami hesitates for a moment as she is unsure about what he is asking her to do. Light gently encourages her, saying it feels good and she should give it a try. He urges her again, adding that they both smell pretty bad after everything they've been through. Light admits that he's covered in sweat and dirt too, offering a bar of soap. He hands it to Yami and mentions that she was stuck in that tank for a long time and it's no wonder she smells like rotting fish. He offers her some food as well, mentioning that as an rank adventurer, he brought some good jerky and jokes that he even got it for free. Several minutes later, Light notices that Yami hasn't returned and he thus comments aloud that she should be done soon. He then calls out to her and asks if she has finished taking a bath. But Yami doesn't answer and she stays completely silent. Growing concerned, Light tries to call her again and this time with more urgency. He tries to calm himself, saying he'll just peek a little. As he approaches the spring, Light once again calls out to Yami, asking what's going on. Suddenly, he sees Yami in the water, sitting with her clothes still on, as she has no idea how to take a bath. Surprised, Light calls out to her again, reminding her that she's supposed to take her clothes off before getting into the water. Yami stays quiet. And as he is unsure how to respond, Light starts to panic slightly, wondering if he really has to start with explaining how to take a bath. Following this, he gently tells her again to take off her clothes first and reassures her that it is okay to do so. Yami hesitates, then softly denies the request and explains that if she takes the clothes off, they'll be gone and she won't get them back. Light reassures her and tells her not to worry about such things. He promises to wash her clothes for her so they'll be clean again and adds that she'll feel clean too. Several minutes later, Light once again calls out Yami and asks if she's done yet. But Yami stays silent again, which makes Light wonder if she didn't understand the instructions. Raising his voice, he calls her name again and says he's going to check whether or not she is taking a bath. As he approaches the lake, is startled as he realizes Yami was just sitting there staring at the water the whole time. He questions whether she even understands the concept of washing her body and wonders how she survived this long. Sighing, Light acknowledges that she was inside a tank all that time. On top of this, if she catches a cold, it'll be a problem for both of them. He reflects that Yami is a girl, but he's never had inappropriate thoughts about her. Although he admits he's probably just trying to convince himself of that. Light knows Yami will never be able to wash her own body, so he decides tired he'll wash her himself. He reassures himself that it's not weird as is just helping because she clearly can't do it on her own. Yami mumbles something, and Light quickly exclaims not to take just the first part of his sentence out of context. After they are done, Light tells her they are finished and Yami finally finds herself in clean clothes. Light suggests they walk a bit farther and then stop for food. He even asks if Yami wants to ride on his back, telling her that if she ever gets tired, she can just say so and he'll carry her anytime. Unfortunately, as they are walking, a monstrous creature bursts from the trees with red malicious eyes. Light and Yami stop in their tracks and decide to face the threat. Light draws his spell quickly and gets ready to protect her. He assesses the situation as there are a lot of enemies, but also realizes that they are weak. Urgently, he shouts for Yami to get behind him, but the latter hesitates. Light calls her name again and asks what on earth she is doing. Meanwhile, Yami stares at the monsters, wide-eyed and frozen like a deer in headlights. Light, who is now growing extremely desperate, shouts her name again, trying to snap her out of it. He quickly defeats the goblins and turns to her to ask if she didn't hear him. He warns her that even if goblins are weak, they'll still kill her if they get the chance. Yami looks at him with questioning expression. A frustrated Light growls under his breath and holds her close, but doesn't actually say anything. Yami lets out a small growl of her own in response. Soon, Light suggests they should have their meal now since it'll be dark soon, pointing to a rock nearby. He says he'll set up camp there and tells Yami to call out if anything happens. When he is alone, he reflects on her behavior and notes that it's no wonder she doesn't even know the basics. Light and Yami sit quietly by the campfire as the stew boils. The aroma from food rises up and Light asks Yami if it smells good. The latter doesn't answer the simple question like a normal human being, but instead asks if this dish is called stew. Light confirms it is and explains that it's a special forest stew, which is one of his favorite recipes from his many quests. Following this, Light begins pointing out the ingredients, noting that some of the leaves smell like garlic and that the root vegetables turn creamy when boiled. He adds that this version includes 5 kinds of herbs and some good jerky. An excited Light announces that it's ready and tells Yami this might be the best stew he has ever cooked. He warns her to be careful because it's hot and explains how to use the spoon to scoop it up. He also demonstrates how to blow so that the stew cools down, and Yami mimics whatever he does before taking a bite. Light watches her closely because his parents never taught him manners and asked how it was. Yami looks at him with her big shiny eyes, which clearly means she enjoyed the food. Pleased, Light smiles and tells her to take her time and eat well. He adds that she can have as much as she wants. Under the open night sky, Light looks at Yami and says he'd like to know more about her. He gently asks if he can ask her a few questions and Yami remains silent but doesn't object. Light begins by questioning if she knows her family name, but she responds in the negative while continuing to eat the stew. Light tries again and asks if she can use magic, but Yami gives the same response that she doesn't know. Next, Light asks if she knows where her home is. He suggests that if she's okay with it, he'll take her back to town. And if she has no home, he can admit her into an orphanage. But Yami answers that her home is the tower. And upon hearing this, Light gently corrects her, saying the magic tower isn't her home as it's just the place she was kept. He asks where she was before that, but once again, Yami answers that she doesn't know anything else. Remembering the past, Yami recalls how on the day she was taken, someone told her that the tower was her home. With a worried look, Light tells her that's not right. He points out that they never welcomed her and that the magic tower rejected even his family. Yami tilts her head in confusion trying to make sense of what he's saying. Addressing her more directly, Light says that she's a girl who was raised in a place where the very concept of the value of her life didn't exist. A worried Light wonders aloud what kind of things they put her through. As he begins to process what she might have gone through, he notices that Yami has drifted off to sleep. Carefully, he wraps Yami in a comforting embrace, offering her warmth as she sleeps. As he watches the flickering sky, Light swears that he'll never forgive them for whatever they did to him and Yami. He promises that when he returns to the magic tower in the capital, he'll make sure to avenge Yami. Light confesses that Agonil once used him as a scapegoat too. He reveals that they threw Yami into that tank like an object. All this has made him so angry that at one point, even considered eliminating the Silverwool team. Light looks down at Yami, still peacefully asleep in his arms. He reflects that if he really went through with this plan, he might get arrested, and then he has no idea what would happen to her. He imagines Yami being sold off alone with no knowledge of how to survive. Even if an orphanage took her in, she would face a hard life. So Light resolves to hold back at least enough to avoid capture. He'll do just enough to make them suffer, and thinks that Agonil is too prideful to admit he was defeated by someone like Light, who is an orphan with a failed attribute. Still, Light knows that even if he ends up hunted, he can find a way to escape. But Yami, who has the survival instincts of a baby elephant, wouldn't survive alone. Holding her small hand gently, Light stares at her sleeping face and promises her softly that he won't leave her alone.